This time. All right. Welcome everybody back to another episode of The Opposite of Cheating, Teaching for Integrity in the Age of AI. I am here today with Phill Dawson, all the way from Australia. He's joining me in his morning, my evening here in California. So welcome, Phill.
Oh, so great to be here, Tricia.
So Phill is along with most of all of his Australian colleagues are favorites of David and mine. You'll see a lot of Australian citations in our book. They are on the leading edge of academic integrity from a teaching and learning perspective, as far as I'm concerned. And they're also on a leading edge from preventing contract cheating and doing a lot. And I know Phill has worked with TEQSA as well, the quality assurance agency there. So we're just in love. We've always been in love with Australia, but they grow in our hearts every year because you all are doing such great work down there. But before we get to all that, tell people a bit more about yourself, who you are, where you work, what you do, and the type of faculty you work with.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit of an unusual one. I am the co-director of a research centre. So we are the Centre for Research in Assessment and Digital Learning at Deakin University.
Mhm.
So very much we don't exist to address academic integrity and all of that, but we do exist to study assessment in higher education. And there's probably no bigger, more prominent topic than academic integrity or AI at the moment in assessment. So that's sort of the way in. My context as a university is we are a large public university,
Mm.
I think something like 60, 70,000 students. So we're talking quite large class sizes. It's not unusual to have a class of 2,000 students.
Mm.
And yeah, some of the integrity challenges that come with that sort of scale are different, but also when you work at scale, some things are feasible that aren't feasible in a tiny class. You can really invest in a lot of the resourcing and design work that you might not do with a really small class.
Yeah. And so those 2,000 person classes, is that literally 2,000 kids sitting in a classroom, or is that hybrid, flex, multiple sections of the same class?
Since the pandemic, it's really largely switched over to a lot of online stuff for the very large class stuff.
Okay.
And then there might be sort of tutorial groups that are smaller,
Right.
30, 40 person, but they still all are, the lectures or that sort of
Okay.
thing that are largely online are taught by this one person who's in charge of the really big class. Um, and there's a need to sort of make things work administratively when you've got to have the same assessment for
Yes.
2,000 people.
Yes. And I'll want to talk to you about that when we get to our later in the conversation about how the heck do you secure online assessments. So that's definitely a good question to have. But before we get there, we have to ask you what we ask everybody, which is, what is your first memory of encountering this phrase or this idea of academic integrity?
Okay, so I was in first year of my university course at the University of Wollongong,
Mm.
and where there's some really good academic integrity
Yep.
scholars there. So I had this really annoying thing I had to do to get my marks released to me. To get access to my grades, I had to complete the Information Literacies Introductory Program, which
Oh,
was a series of online multiple choice things. And, you know, it was not amazing and it was a hurdle for me.
yeah.
And then I kind of never saw it again because I was studying computer science. So all of this arcane stuff about referencing really didn't have a lot of meaning to me as someone who was writing computer code most of the time.
Mm-hmm. And did you cheat and get in trouble?
No, no, no. I did the right thing and all that. I tried to do it the right way. I
Yeah.
even went into the library to try and learn these things. And
Okay.
I don't know, it wasn't tremendously useful because I think it focused on the technical aspects of
Yeah.
reference construction,
Yeah.
which they're important, but they're not the most important thing.
No, they're arbitrary, right? MLA, Chicago, APA, everybody decides a different way of doing things. And I talk to students, I talk about why we write with integrity, and the formatting of citations, computers do that for you now, right? Machines do that for you now. So you actually don't even have to learn that. You just have to tell it which program to use. And so, yeah, I wish we'd spend a lot more time talking to students about the why we cite, the underlying principles and the reasons. And I think we make it too hard. I always say to students, look, you're talking to a friend and you say, hey, have you seen that latest show on Netflix? That's citation. You're not saying, hey, did you hear about the show I created? Right? Like that's a citation. So it's so easy and kind of matter of fact, and yet we make it so complicated by focusing on the technicality parts of it.
Yeah, I agree with you entirely. And I think and this is a snapshot in time. I think this is
Yeah.
kind of the bad old days, but
Yeah.
it very much assumed a text-based discipline.
Yes.
And for me, writing code, I was doing citation all the time when I'm writing code because
That's
I remember there's this one thing in the C++ language I was learning, which is hashtag include, and in the name of the software library you're including in your code.
yeah.
That's citation, but it was never revealed to me that this and this are conceptually the same thing.
Same thing. Yeah. Wow. It's amazing to think of these things. I remember that was the one computer programming course I took too in my undergrad. I did not like it. I struggled through that. Okay. You are an expert on assessments. You write all the time about secure assessments, and we cite you in our book about secure assessments. So I think I just want you to tell folks what you mean by that term. And then what is that? We'll start with like, what does that look like today in the age of AI? And I'll preface this by saying we have had our first reported case of a student wearing the Ray-Ban Meta glasses.
Oh, wow.
Mhm.
So these are Meta's glasses that are kind of an augmented reality type thing. Yeah,
Well, they
fascinating.
take photos and they have a listening device.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So in the book and elsewhere, I talk about a concept called assessment security.
yeah.
I came to that because the concept of academic integrity seemed to be doing a lot of work. So it seemed to be bundling in both a really important positive mission of developing, those fundamental values of academic integrity, which are very important.
Mhm.
If we don't develop those in people, if people only don't cheat because they were being surveilled, who are we graduating? We're graduating people who only don't cheat when someone's looking at them.
Yeah.
So that's a bad thing to not have those. We need those fundamental values. But the concept of academic integrity was also being put to work by vendors of remote proctoring software saying that these promoted academic integrity. And to me, they don't promote academic
No.
integrity. They may or may not do something to address the problem of cheating,
Yes.
but the work that they do is something in the book I call assessment security. So
Mm.
assessment security broadly breaks down to two key things. One of them is the person doing the assessment who we think they are?
Hmm.
And the other one is, are they doing it in the circumstances that we would like them to do it in?
Mm.
And both of those things matter
Hmm.
because, well, obviously the person needs to be the person, but the circumstances also matter too, because when we're making a judgment as assessors about what someone's capable of, the supports and tools and people that they have access to influence our ability to make that judgment.
Hmm.
And in the book, the big argument is we can't just have academic integrity or assessment security. We need both. And there's an uneasy compromise or tension between the two.
Yes, and we will cite, we will give folks, I mean, it's in the book anyways, but we'll give folks the name of that your books and the designing assessments for the digital age. I don't know if I'm butchering that title, but that's the title of it in my head. Just so influential for me. I have to say, when I was reading it, I was like, yes, Phill, yes, this makes total sense. He says assessment security begins where academic integrity ends. And I use that quote all the time in all my presentations. So you are with me every time I'm presenting. Um, so the idea of this security thing, I had to come along to it because I used to say we want to graduate people who didn't cheat, even though they had the opportunity. And it wasn't until the pandemic and this move to online assessment where I thought, wow, this is actually quite not only a dereliction of duty, but cruel to say to a 17, 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old, the typical traditional college age student we talk about, to say, go home, take your test online. You're not allowed to use this, this, and this. Please don't. And I've had students say to me, like, I just can't resist the temptation. And I thought, I don't know that I could have at 18 or 19 either. So, so is surveillance bad? You know, there's all this talk about surveilling. Oh, we don't want to surveil students. We want to trust students. Isn't it bad to do it?
This is a fantastic question. And there's, a whole really good literature and bunch of researchers on that. David Lyon's work is probably some of the best there. I think surveillance may be good or bad, but it's necessary. There are situations in life where we accept that some sort of surveillance is necessary. Surveillance at the bank so nobody robs the bank is necessary to a degree. You can say what you like about airport security, but some degree of airport security surveillance, I think most people would say, is necessary. The details are where people might disagree. And with assessment security, we've had face-to-face proctored exams for thousands of years, going back to sort of entry into the Chinese civil service. And we've viewed this as a necessary thing sometimes. And that's surveillance. I think where it becomes a problem for me is where it's too invasive or where it just doesn't work. And
It's
I think
security theater.
surveillance that's security theater it's indefensible in my view.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. And I remind people the definition of surveillance. It starts with a close observation. And when did a close observation become a bad thing in education?
We want to be seeing what people are capable of.
Right? It's our
Yeah.
responsibility.
Well, it is. It is. That definition and the definition of assessment. So the definition of assessment I normally go with is one from Gordon Jogan, and it is, I'm probably going to butcher it, but to observe what someone's done and from that infer what they're capable of. But you
Yes.
can't do that without without observing what they've done.
Yes.
Observation is necessary in education.
Yeah. And so let's talk about that. Okay, I've got 2,000 kids in my class. I can't closely observe them on every single assessment. So what's the approach? Let's just pretend all the assessments are in person, not online, or maybe they are. I guess I want to know, are there tips for how to do that with 2,000 people if you can't be in person, I suppose? Or even if you can, it's really hard to monitor that many people.
Yeah, and I think this is the biggest challenge that we have at the moment in the field. So you've asked a very hard question.
I know, but you're going to have the perfect answer, the one magic bullet solution, right?
Look, I think I've got things to think about. So the first one is, how important is it in this moment that we have a very high level of assessment security? And that will vary across a degree program. I would argue that the moments in the final year, it's actually quite important that we don't graduate people who can't do that sort of final year stuff. And in professional programs that are highly regulated, they are able to tell you where some of those moments are. So the thing that goes along with that is maybe some of the moments we might not secure as much.
Okay.
But for the moments we really want to secure a lot, I've always been a big fan of talking with students about their work and actually having an in-depth conversation with them, doing it in class time. When I used to teach computer science, we would just sit down with students in class, and we spent all of our class time was spent just talking with students about the work they'd submitted. It's both a feedback dialogue and an assessment security approach.
Yeah, because I'm thinking like with flipped classrooms, it's a lot easier to do that. If you're not spending time just talking at your students, you can actually meet with them or observe them doing things in groups. And if there's that group accountability where I have to show up and know something to work with my group, that's also going to help with that kind of security as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the flipped classroom, I am a big believer in it as an approach. It's actually my most successful research has been flipped classroom research,
Hmm. Oh,
not this stuff. But it really does allow us to think, hey, what's the best use of our limited instructional resources that we have? And let's spend the precious moments we have together on
yeah.
something that's educationally meaningful. And educationally meaningful includes us understanding what you can do, where you might need help, and yeah, unfortunately, where you might not have actually done the work yourself.
Yeah. So you mentioned fourth year, and I get that, but we also, if we waited to fourth year, wouldn't that be really super high stakes and cause a lot of stress? Is there a way we can benchmark things at certain, or do it at certain benchmarks along the way to that to ensure students are progressing? I'm thinking more like competency-based education approach, right? Rather than course unit based approach.
Yeah, so in some work that we did for the higher education regulator TEQSA in Australia, and TEQSA are outstanding, and I feel really sorry for you in the States not having
Thank
something as
you.
cool as TEQSA. TEQSA are so
Yes.
great. Um, they funded a group of us to get together, a large group of experts, to come to a sort of what we called 75% consensus statement.
Okay.
And one of the items on that is something like assessment security at meaningful points across the degree to support progression and completion. And it's really important that we have both of those. So
Yeah.
we've got secure assessment for the completion side of things, because that's what matters to society,
Yeah.
but also secure assessment for moments of progression where we say, hey, it's the end of first year. We've seen you can do the things, not just we've given you take-home tasks that you could
Right.
very well have fed into AI, but we've also seen you in moments that we trust. We've had that conversation and we think, yes, you're ready to go on to second year, third year, fourth year.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. Nice. And how do we do any of that secure stuff in a remote assessment?
This is
That's
really
the
hard.
question.
And we are in the middle of a conversation in Australia with some quite polarized views on that. There are some
Mhm.
that believe it's just not possible to do it remotely.
I'm in that camp.
Yeah, I think it's really hard, but I think we may come up with a combination of approaches. And here's where I'd sort of build on Kiata Rundle and colleagues'
Mhm.
adaptation of the concept of Swiss cheese
Yeah.
to academic integrity assessment security. All of the approaches we could do online have significant holes. But if
Yeah.
you layer them together like pieces of Swiss cheese, they have
Mhm.
less holes overall. So what might we do? We might have something like what we're doing now, a conversation.
Yep.
And yes, I could very well be a deep fake. I acknowledge
Yeah.
that's a thing and have
And that's
been,
only going to get better. Harder
yeah,
to sync.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think we haven't had the chat GPT moment for deepfakes yet, where
Mm.
it goes from a technology that only experts could use to something that everyday people could use in real time. But
Yeah.
that moment will happen. And when it
Yeah.
does, things are going to change.
Hmm.
But I think, some sort of interactive real-time thing,
Hmm.
something that is supervised in other ways, and remote proctored exams are one of these things. They have problems.
Yeah.
I am convinced that remote proctored exams are an effective deterrent to cheating, but I'm not convinced they are effective at detecting
Yeah.
cheating.
Yeah.
And that's basically because when researchers try to cheat in them,
They can.
they are able to cheat and don't get
Yeah.
caught.
Yeah. Yeah. Very, very
Um,
easy. Yeah.
yeah, so I think there's some of that. I think there are some supervised writing platforms that exist. So, yeah, some of those track people as they produce work.
Hmm.
And then there are some other sort of more surveillance things, like I'd point to Wiru, which is something that Sean Lemon, Kane
Forget what's
Murdoch
talking
have
to
been
them.
working on in Australia, that enables them to identify some of the more criminal end of cheating in online learning. So
Hmm.
I think it's a bunch of layers like that. Something I would say, though, is the burden of proof is on the person saying the course is secure.
Yep.
So if you have a course, a program of study, a degree that you're trying to say this is a secure online program, show me,
Show me.
prove it to me.
Yeah. And
It really
that's,
matters that you can prove it.
yeah, and you actually have to do that in Australia, whereas we don't. In the US, I have said to all the accrediting agencies who will listen to me, all of the schools that you accredit could have students cheat their way through the degree, and you would still accredit them because there is absolutely no measure for are you doing anything about academic integrity or degree integrity or security. So that's a scary thing that surprises people here in the US and Canada too, frankly. They're decentralized as well.
Yeah, whereas in Australia, I go around and I talk to a lot of, we call them academic boards, the top committee
Yeah.
at each university. I go around, I talk to a lot of them and I talk to the chairs of academic boards, and they are very concerned about this
Yeah.
because our accreditation to be a university at all depends on our ability to only let people cross the graduation stage who have met all of the
Yeah.
outcomes.
What a
We can't
concept.
say even you mostly did the things, you were
Yeah.
able to do most of the things. No, you have to do all of them
Yeah.
or we are in breach.
Yeah. What a concept. Okay, we need to move on. So you've had to respond to cheating. Tell us about it. What have you learned from that?
All right, so I have taught in undergraduate, in postgraduate, I've taught faculty development courses, doctoral students, all those sorts of things. I remember I'll tell you my first experience of it.
Okay.
We had a head of school come in when I was teaching a course that was very much how to write, um, how to write for
Mhm.
computer science students. So I
Okay.
was teaching this course, and the new head of school said, I want to meet with absolutely everybody who makes even the most minor of infractions. So, as a very new teacher
Mhm.
myself, I thought I took this very literally. And
Yeah.
if you did anything that was in breach of the rules, I put you through the process. And yeah, his diary filled up very, very quickly, and he stopped having that. So I've had that, the sort of
Yeah.
introductory thing. And from that, I've really learned the difference between the poor academic practice stuff, which
Yeah.
we now at our university really triage through an educative process,
Yeah.
and the hardcore criminal contract cheating stuff that Kath Ellis and
Yeah.
Kane Murdoch and others are experts at investigating. So
Yeah.
I've had that experience. I've also had experience for people who really have no excuse. So
Mm.
I was the editor of a journal and I was very familiar with the articles in that journal. And I had a student in my faculty development course, so this is a senior member of faculty, submit an assignment that had blatant copy paste from that journal.
The journal you were the editor of.
Yeah, yeah. And I had a chat with them and said, "Hey, this is not okay. Would you allow your students to do this?" And they said, "I didn't know this was a problem."
Oh my
And that was
goodness.
incredibly troubling that this person had risen through the ranks, had supervised doctoral students, had taught large classes,
Wow.
and didn't know this was a problem. So anyway, I had to go through the processes of the faculty I was teaching through, which was a different department.
Yeah.
Anyway, I actually followed the processes, and this person's name ended up on what they called their register of plagiarists, which was supposedly a public document, and they never had anyone added to the register of plagiarists. So this person ended up the sole name
Oh
on the
no.
register of plagiarists.
That's what we try to tell students, right? Like the consequences you're getting now seem serious, but we don't post your name up anywhere, and that's a perfect illustration of it gets worse. The older, the further you get in your career, the consequences will get worse. Yeah.
Yeah, it
Okay.
really does.
Yeah.
And I think the long-term consequences get worse, but also technology is just going to make this so much worse.
Yeah.
I think if your or my undergraduate work were run through some of the systems that exist today,
Mm,
I don't know whether we would be found to have done
I
things
have no
that
idea.
were not considered an issue back then, but very
Yeah.
much are now.
Yeah, I'd be really surprised because it was so darn hard to plagiarize back then. I mean, you had to physically, you know, I had to handwrite copy off of something. I didn't have a laptop that I could easily type, right? If I was in the library, it was copying with my pen and
I
paper and retyping
yeah,
that on my typewriter.
I think we're going to end up with sort of plagiarism of ideas, the
Yes.
taking an idea from one place and not because you spent the day in the library and something brushed off on you
Yes.
and you reproduced it in your work. And I think we're going to end up with assessment security tools that address that issue.
Yeah.
And that's a whole minefield.
Oh, wow. Oh, part two of the conversation. Let's end this one with one piece of advice you would give to our viewers about academic integrity in the age of AI. What something we haven't talked about yet, or something we have talked about, but you want to put an exclamation point on?
So I'm going to refer to a paper that my colleague, Dr. Thomas Corbin, is leading at the moment, which hopefully is published by the time that people are able to hear this.
Yeah.
Um, in the paper, we talk about structural changes to assessment and discursive changes to assessment.
Mm.
The basic line of the argument in the paper is you should not set rules for students around the use of AI that you are not able to enforce. And I think this is a really hard thing to come to terms with, but
Mhm.
we can't set students a take-home essay assignment and say, don't use AI, or use AI for idea
Yes.
generation, but not for
Yep.
editing or not for content production.
Yep.
That's just being unfair to the people who will follow those rules because
Yep.
most people just won't.
Yep. Agreed. That gets back, circles us right back to that 18-year-old who told me, like, I just can't resist the temptation. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the paper, we say you need to make structural changes. So
Yep.
changes to the structure of the assessment, which might
Yes.
include supervision where it matters, and not do discursive changes to assessment, just
Love it.
telling people stuff because it just
Okay.
doesn't work.
Love it. So we can't share that link yet. You said it's not published yet, but maybe you'll,
Sadly, not yet, but
okay.
hopefully soon.
Okay, but maybe you'll follow up with me when it is, make sure I see the link and we can put it on our website at that point.
Absolutely. And everyone should follow you on all the social media because you post interesting things.
Oh, well, thank you. You do too. And Phill, and if you want to follow Phill, he's also on LinkedIn and he talks about his improv shows that he does in Australia as well. So if you're ever in Australia and in the area, you'll want to check out his improv show. So thank you, Phill, for appearing on this episode.
Thank you so much, Tricia. It's been a joy.